computer. Now I am recording, so that is wonderful. Let's get ourselves in full flight. You are welcome. As I say, we're recording, and isn't it just marvelous to see the sun shining? Really feels that we obviously came through the equinox at the weekend. The clock springs forward next weekend. We're going to see such a stretch in the evening, but I'm looking out. I can see a little bit of cloud. I know it's a little bit blustery, but by God, it raises the heart and raises the spirits. I hope you're enjoying the spring, and as we kind of look towards the summer, and I hope you're enjoying the program that we're on as well. We are galloping through it, my friends. We are in our fourth session together, called Webinar 3, because we have workshops on Saturdays, but it's session 4 really is what I think of it. And this evening we continue our journey and conclude on the 7 core competencies. So we are going to do some content this evening, not really so much conversation. I have a little bit of time at the end, so we can have a check-in on the assignment, because you're all poised to do assignment 1. I think it's due in on the 1st of April. So that is but a week away, isn't it? So let's give ourselves a little bit of time on that. So really what I want to do is I want to gallop forward, if it's okay. I want to cover the content of Agile, Innovation, and Open. We've slotted up the slides a week and a half ago. They're slides that you hopefully can read your good self. I'm going to bring you through them just to give you the kind of the key discussion points, the key themes, if we do that. But there's quite a bit in this evening's session, so I'm going to kind of kick forward fairly quickly, if that's okay. I'm also going to a little bit just avoid this evening, if it's all right, kind of doing our mental surveys, because we've a heavy content to get through, and I want to give ourselves some time to make sure we talk about assignment, because I know that's in and on most people's minds. It's creating noise in your mind. Forgive me, it's the evening. So we are going to conclude this evening on the 7 core competencies with workshop 1. Remember, the Saturday we did customer centricity. The last evening we met, we did efficiency, we did engagement, and we did analytics. So we're working our way up this pyramid. And this evening we cover agile, innovation, and open. Just again to remind you, like, what did we talk about when it comes to efficiency? Well, we said, look, if our departure point is to be customer centric, efficiency helps us to create a better experience. It helps us to reduce costs and create capacity for reinvestment. It also, simplification and efficiency should take risk out. And ultimately, we want to clean the closet and make sure that we take the waste out, so that as we digitalize, and digitally transform, that we're doing so on a simpler canvas. And we showed you this front of house and back of house themes for where you can find opportunities to simplify, to improve experience, create efficiencies, create a capacity, reduce risk, and ultimately create a cleaner path forward. We talked both in the customer centric session and the last time together again, that this whole idea of thinking about the roles that different channels play, our digital channels and our human channels, and understanding how over time we can potentially rebalance to ensure we maximize the opportunity for engagement, minimize the effort to execute, and help people to do business with us. So again, we can maximize the long-term relationship, so that we can further continue to build business development. And you get the idea. It's the virtual kind of cycle, and it's all around how can we use digital to do the heavy lifting on simple, high volume, but maybe low value activity, so we can rebalance. And it's the same for AI. So digital AI is just part of digital. It's the same idea. How do we use digital AI, these technologies, to simplify the simple, and create capacity and human time and capability, but also, just pure resource, so we can have humans on the more complex, maybe low volume, but certainly the high value stuff like pensions, like mortgages, etc., etc. So you get that's the concept that we're trying to follow, and we talked about in behind that there needs to be, a robust construct around an engagement strategy that's deeply, empowered by user experience skills and principles and frameworks, to make sure journeys achieve maximum efficiency, maximum ease, so that we help people get the job done. But obviously, digital marketing and execution is critical because we need to get people into the funnels, into our journeys. So, how we think about going to the market in a digital world, even if it's in a physical environment. So, the billboards, et cetera, and this whole idea of digital product management, that we will come back to. We're going to do a Saturday on the human factor. So we're going to come back to digital product management. But we spent a bit of time, that idea of how do we set up teams to use digital to actually build experiences, rich in user experience from digital marketing right through to execution. And that necessitates the foundations of digital analytics and insights, but also modern ways to develop and deploy, a bit of which we'll touch into this evening. So with the kind of the key frameworks that I would have shared with you. And then we also talked about data analytics and this whole idea, you got to get your data sorted, then you can apply business intelligence, in a 360 way, whether it's in the customer quadrant of your business, in the risk quadrant, in the people, or in the actually the operational quadrant of your business, and how we need to leverage that data to tell us what happened, to predict what might happen, and ultimately to use the latest in automation and AI so that we can get the machine to help us to do basic tasks and augment our knowledge and augment our creativity when it comes to actually superhuman or super agencing ourselves. So those little recap points, and that necessitates data analytics strategies, knowing the data, but being really clear about where we want to build value or where we want to solve problems. And that then leads to, really defining where data and AI can be deployed in order to solve business demands. And that necessitates, new leadership, new models, new tools, but very definitely ways of working and adoption are critical parts of that. So just wanted to remind you, because they're the kind of key frameworks that I want you thinking about when you do your assignment. I gave you lots of reading in advance. I'm going to presume that you're reading it. If you're not, try and skip into it. Even do, use your large language models, your co-pilots, whatever you use, and make sure you're just trying to think about it through. The Agile at Scale, one of my favorite articles in HBR. It's a couple of years old now, but it just talks to, such a sensible way about, this shift to Agile. I was saying at the top of this meeting, I spent day to day with a team, senior executive team, really trying to think through their operating model and really trying to help them think through how they speed up their design, well, actually their ideation, their design, their delivery, and their go-to-market for the products and services that they have, and how to do that, they need to have a shift in how they think about organizing their teams away from projects through to products, or actually to outcomes, as we were calling about it today. And that's to do that. It's about building, empowered cross-functional teams, and they become the engine of change. But that necessitates a lot of executive shifts. So they're really, executives need to stop giving requirements and setting expectations on outcomes. They need to give resources over to these kind of self-contained units, and they need to spend time sponsoring those teams to move faster, think from the outside in, and use working software where they can in order to test and ship features, products, experiences to customers. And that requires a different way to think about governance, because it's not about governance to control, it's governance to enable. It's a very different philosophy. We'll touch a little bit on it this evening. And all of that is, like everything we've said, digital is culture, because it's how we think defines what we do. So if we want to do things differently, we need to think about things differently. And the article really gets into that idea around how to think differently about agile in your organization. And it gets into some frameworks and examples about how to scale, but actually pulls through that it's not frameworks, it's principles and it's execution discipline, and we're going to touch in on that this evening. Look, there were some other pre-reads. I shared with you the Board of Innovation, how they do innovation audits. I'm going to show you an innovation audit. If you've looked at the slides already, you'll see it. So that's just a reference in relation to that. Gartner is always a nice place to go and have a look. And they, for instance, on the left, they, give you these nice frameworks for open innovation. So open innovation is where you invite people, either individuals or groups, into either solve a problem or share potential ideas or solutions. That's really what the chart on the left goes with. And the HBR article on disrupting finance, really nice article. There's the CEO of Oak North Banks. There's Daniel Schreiber. He's from insurance, or sorry, in Lemonade Insurance. So it's a really nice conversation. A couple of years old, but really nice conversation. Citigroup analyst in there as well. They're just having a good conversation about the journey towards innovation and open innovation in organizations. Really nice. And look, check in with Accenture, check in with Deloitte. They're two good environments for just getting some insights, perspectives, and kind of research and stats on how financial services is progressing around things like building digital or indeed open banking, which is something we'll discuss this evening. So, little small recap, want to kind of keep going, but also want to check in with you all. Everybody okay? Following me? Any questions? Let me check the chat. If there's any questions you have, jump in. Otherwise, I'll keep going. Okay, everyone good? Keep going. Thank you, Anastasia. Appreciate that. Lovely stuff. Right, let's go. So we've done the first four core competencies. Today we finish out on agile, innovation, and open. So let's jump in. Agile, whoa, much flouted term, much misunderstood. I want to try and just unpack it, simplify it, and give you the bearings. Perhaps you work in an agile setup. Perhaps your counterparts and colleagues are working in an agile setup. If you do, please share your thoughts. Jump in by all means. But why we talk about agile and what is it? It really the two things I want to try to work with you on this evening. So why? Well, we know the world is increasingly accelerating in terms of the change that's happening, which presents both opportunity and risk. And the whole premise of agile is, can we find a way to work together as colleagues to keep pace, if not indeed set the pace of change in the market that modern technologies allow us and facilitate us and equip us to do. Because if we codify, virtualize, digitalize the experiences and the processes of our organization in the right kind of modern technologies, we have the potential almost in real time to evolve and to change the experience from the market back in. And with that capability to change the experience and the journeys in the market, we have the potential to move quicker, move faster. The other thing that we can do is we can use the data in those experiences and journeys to direct and guide us on what to do next. So pace and data for me are really at the heart of this whole idea of being able to create and deploy and build new outcomes at pace. So, listen, let's go back. This is not a new thing. It's 25, 26 years old, the turn of the millennium. We started to see in the world that these new technologies were emerging. Why? On the back of the web, as we came through the kind of the dot-com, and some leading technologists got together and they said, you know what, we need to help the world with a code, with a kind of almost an equation for how to be smart with smart technologies so that we can create better value quicker in the world, and people can basically leverage and harness new technologies. So they wrote and published the Agile Manifesto. If you get a chance, it is worth having a look at, but I've summarized it here. There are four principles and 12 values. And the principles are it's about individuals and interactions, not about processes and tools. So it's very human led. It's about working software over comprehensive documentation. So don't capture requirements, actually go straight to code. And that is the piece about pace and velocity. It's about starting and working back from the customer as opposed to starting on the inside and trying to define what you want to do into the market. Start with the market back. Don't start from the back into the market. And then it's about introducing the ability to respond to change and be flexible because the data can point you in new directions. Your interactions with colleagues and customers can point you in new directions. So this idea of being able to build in, flexibility when we're working towards the customer, we're working software and data that's almost gives us real time is really at the essence. And you got the 12 values on the right. I'm not going to read them out. You can see them there. Hopefully you have read them. And really those values epitomize the art of agile because I'm gonna say to you it's an art. There are many methods of deploying these principles and values. And in the slides, we go through a couple of them, and I'm going to touch on them in a minute. But it's the art, it's the philosophy of starting with the customer, working backwards, using modern technologies to move at pace, not getting blocked by processes, but getting unblocked by colleague collaboration, and then reflecting and being in a method or a mindset of continuous improvement. I mean, I'm trying to super summarize the principles and the values here, but I really want to share with you that it's a philosophy, it's a way of thinking, it's a culture that then gets codified in different agile practices. I don't know, last count, there were 50 different, 53, something like that, different agile practices. Some of the bigger ones are Scrum, Kanban, etc., etc. But in some of the slides I've shared with you some of those approaches. But what's really important is it's the essence, it's the philosophy that's captured in the principles and the values that organizations need to think about. And this kind of follows more generally look leadership philosophy over the last, maybe century. But certainly in the last 10, 15, 20 years, I've seen an acceleration of organizations moving away from kind of top down kind of organizations where a customer gets lost in the middle, the seniors decide what to do, the people down at the, in the broad church of the organization, they don't know where they're going, it gets really hard to, kind of decipher and filter out what we're and you end up with this in bigger organizations with this friction and competition and waste. I mean, may or may not be familiar with it, but that even that team I was with today was all angry and frustrated about it's really hard when all the decisions are being made to the top to see those flow down and get executed. And it also often happens that when the decision are made at the top that they're very business or very organizational centric. So they're about commercials or they're about, competition and so on and so forth. Whereas the modern business philosophy and thinking is about let's start with the customer. Let's decentralize the work that needs to be done to build towards, outcomes for the customer. Modern technologies allows us to do that. And the idea is to introduce decentralized decision making, adaptability, data-led, outcome centric teams that basically build and ship in very short period of times features, benefits, experiences, and ultimately for delivering better outcomes. So very, very big shift. Probably gone on for 100 years or so, but really been embraced in the last 15 or 20 years by this idea of moving to the agile organization. And on the left, kind of just explaining, in the 1920s in the last in industry three, or actually in industry two, this idea of, the great man and the trait heroes, everything was decided at the top and cascaded down right through to today. We really see distributed leadership, where almost the organization's becoming like a social network, just the idea of decentralization. Uh, all quite conceptual. We're going to bring it to life a little bit in a second, but that's a really, really important shift. So the leadership shift has been part of the agile shift, but agile shift is just about maybe different practices and methods to imbue and embody that philosophy of putting the user in the center, using technology and data, and self-organizing teams to ideate, develop, and shift in lightning speed, increments, innovations, or new developments so that value can be created at the speed of the internet, if I want to put it like that. So here, you can see what that means for org structures and teams and projects and jobs and roles. It really does upset the old order, and it's a very significant undertaking for new organizations to go on, right down to rewards, right down to even environments and spaces where people are co-located versus in silos and in domains. Is a very tough journey. It's a very holistic shift for an organization, and it takes time and attention. And in the slides, I hope everybody's okay with this so far. I'm just giving you the kind of the headlines, and the slides are kind of just shared with you. I mean, there's different houses of Agile, or different codes of Agile. Scrum is probably one of the best known. Just try to give you, if you don't know it already, and many of you will, but it's really kind of worth having to think about. How does that work in real life? Well, it works on the basis that there's a product owner who has a vision for what they want to do for their user. So that could be a customer, it could be a broker, it could be a partner, whatever it's going to be. It could be for a colleague as well, by the way. And then they have a list of things they could potentially do. They call the product backlog. And what they do is they prioritize from the product backlog down onto a sprint backlog. And then they have self-organizing teams. So it's fully capable teams who basically work in short cycles of iterations. Could be 4 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks, sometimes even down to 2 weeks, to pick an idea, to develop, design, and deploy that idea in that 2, 3, 4 week cycle. They work together every day to take out barriers, to update on progress, to share learnings, and ultimately they ship increments in short periods of time. They tell the organization about that, but really importantly, they test with the customer all through, and they release in short periods of time. So that's the kind of the essence of the Scrum house of Agile. There's also a house called Kanban, which tends to be done by larger teams that are not where there are maybe more technical experts, and where they don't necessarily all work to one single outcome in one short period of time. They may be building multiple products, multiple features. They may be testing multiple variants of marketing engagements, journey features, etc., etc. And what they do, same philosophy. They make sure they start with their users. They have a thing called a Kanban. They identify what work has been done, what they want to do next, and every day, every couple of days, every week. Again, different people do it slightly different ways. They identify what's the next best thing that we can do based on what our users want and where the greatest value is, and they ship features, benefits, journey enhancements, etc., on an ongoing basis. So it's a more complex kind of setup than Scrum, but important that we know there are different ways through which this agile philosophy can be deployed. you could go into detail. We could do a whole kind of series on all of this. I do encourage you to just get to grips with, different methods, different ways, because they should be used in different context for different needs, and so on. And this is, we always have the conversation about, well, agile versus waterfall. Waterfall is not dead. It's not gone. In fact, the team I was with today, we were identifying that there are still large projects with very clear scope, with maybe a lot of risk and complexity, and that require more traditional project management approach. And they can exist side by side with agile. And what I think is really important, that organizations think about how they organize teams in different ways for different contexts, to make sure that the method matches the mandate, which is really important as well. But Agile Waterfall, very different in its setup, in its starting point, in its working patterns, in its time frames, in its resource allocation, et cetera, et cetera. Both are valuable, so it's really important that we say that. But we do see the world more and more thinking about how it moves to agile. You have the Wagile, sorry, movement, where people are starting to adopt agile principles within a waterfall. It's this idea of sprint planning and doing, breaking waterfall work down into sprints. All these variations are out there. One of the things people, just as captured at the bottom of this slide, is around agile. Sometimes there's this kind of notion that agile increases risk because we don't know where we're going necessarily. It's deployed, it's devolved or dispersed to the local team. We can't guarantee, what outcomes they're going after, et cetera, et cetera. So there's sometimes a sense of loss of control, particularly by leaders in organizations, in this shift to more agile-like ways of working. And in many ways, I would remind us that actually moving to decomposing, if that makes sense, to actually minimizing smaller work packages to be done in shorter periods of time, actually improves the risk profile, because it's much more finite, it's easier to undo. And actually, by the very nature of agile, you're allowing flexibility to pivot and change in mid-cycle. That idea for that, introducing that flexibility, actually can reduce significant risk that goes with traditional waterfall practices. Anastasia, I see your note, and thank you very much for that. But it often is a blend. And again, I didn't include any extra reading this evening, by the way, because there's loads of articles in these slides. I do encourage you to go and have a look at some of that. Right, so that's the kind of essence of agile. I have given you some slides about, how do you step into and build up towards agile, and what are the key architectures and so on and so forth. I'm not going to talk you, and I'm not going to read this slide for you and talk it through, other than I'm sharing this material with you to get your teeth into and have a think about, if you're not already, how could you start to think about introducing these kind of practices, testing and learning with them, and ultimately maturing with them. So what would that look like, and what are the prerequisites? Um, and many of you are working in this method in this way already. Some of you may not be, some of you may have a desire to. It is definitely worth, exploring. If not, it's definitely worth continuously appraising and evaluating and improving it, because it's, by its very nature, it's that idea of continuous growth mindset improvement in the way we put teams together, to use technologies, to think about the customer back in, and how do we create more value quicker, and how do we use technology to help us to do that. That's the very essence of it in many regards. So, conscious, I want to keep us on time this evening. It's just gone 7:30, so I'm perfectly in tune with kind of doing, 20, 30 minutes per content piece. Is that okay with anybody? Any questions? Any thoughts before I move forward? Everybody doing all right? Pause, pause. Sure, everybody's okay. Take a little drink. I've done a lot of talking over the last couple of days, so just want to make sure I keep the voice in good shape. Okay, excellent stuff. Let us move on. So, agile by its very essence, uh, is substance for, or is a foundation for experimentation. So again, if you take that idea, we're going to use modern technology and the data that's captured within it to get the insight and the pace for us to test and learn in small increments about what really is going to shift the needle to value. So if we take that, that's the kind of nice kind of bridge into agile, and that agile philosophy is all about, as we kind of say here, is about underpinning that. So I want to kind of unpack innovation a little bit, but why has it become so important in organizations? Well, nothing we haven't covered before, because this increasing acceleration of what technology can do, and then the harnessing of that by organizations through practices like Agile, um, is basically compressing the lifespan of organizations. So, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, the average lifespan, rolling 7-year average lifespan, is captured by who captured it? I know I have it cited here. Innosight captured it, yeah. Was 30 to 40 years. Today, the average life cycle is half that, is 15 to 20 years. Why? That's disruption that's playing out into the marketplace. So there's an existential necessity that to see innovation not as something that happens over there in an R&D function in a corner. It's actually, and you'll all know it and you'll all see it, like innovation sits at the heart of any business. And actually, again, that team I was with today, we were using this, the Three Horizons model, to say that organizations today need to be able to think and execute about at least three horizons of innovation at the same time. So, in the core, there should be constant innovation to improve what we already do today. So, the things, our existing products in our existing markets, we should always be driving to improve the experience and release capacity through simplification in order to stay ahead of our customers' expectations, stay ahead of the competition, or certainly keep pace with the competition, but always trying to find new capacity that we can put into the other horizons of innovation. So typically the next horizon of innovation, horizon two, is called adjacent. So that's where you take this premise of what you do today, so take it into new products, or take it into new markets. But this is basically extending your business beyond where you are today. And the whole idea of transformational innovation is actually, creating new markets in its very essence. What's used to be interesting, people used to look at this Three Horizon model and say, well, we've got to do some core, then to do some adjacent, and then when we've that done, then we'll do some transformation. No, you're doing all those things at the same time, and that's the multimodal or the multi-speed organization. But really important to have the right mindset around this, and the right allocation of resources and the right expectations of return. So kind of down the bottom of the bars, I'm indicating that, the multi-speed organization, or what I also call the ambidextrous organization, will probably have 70% of its resources, continuously improving in the core. The return on investment is usually pretty low. I mean, it's going to incremental returns, 10% as indicated here. But that 10%, because of the scale of the 70% that's deployed, buys you the capacity to invest in adjacent and transformational innovation, as well as stay pace in a disrupting competitive marketplace, which is about, just, and the return on investment then is keeping your competitive position. When you move out to transformational innovation, I mean, you probably only should have a small percentage of resources, maybe 10% deployed, but and I don't have a probability in there, so I probably should have a probability bar, because the probability of success is probably only going to be 10%. But if you achieve that, with 10% resource deployed, with a 10% probability of success, you know, the game changers happen out there, and that's where you potentially get the 70% return on investment. But it tends to be 70% on 10%. So, and that's where the mindset and the mentality, and I'll cover that in a second, needs to be a little bit different. And in the middle is kind of like, 20% resources applied to adjacent, with the idea of 20% return on investment. But probably, probabilities in reality are you're experimenting as you go through this. But I think that idea of 70, 20, 10 across different horizons, all working concurrently, is the essence of what we're trying to position with you as the innovative organization, the multimodal or the multi-speed or the ambidextrous organization. But here's the thing. They have to run in parallel. There's got to be some symbiosis, but they're each of these kind of modes or speeds of innovation are all trying to do different things, as you can see from the strategic intent. Exploiting your business or Horizon One is all about cost and profit. It's all about incremental returns, sweating the core that you have today. Whereas Horizon Two, or extending your business, is about diversifying into, adjacent places, new products, new markets, new segments, etc., etc. So it's really about stretching the core. And disruptive innovation, Horizon 3, is almost about, reinventing and relearning. And if you just took trading, right? So if we take, an investment business or an insurance business, I mean, savings, insurance products. I mean, in sweating the core, we're trying to digitize, we're trying to digitalize, we're trying to automate. It's really just incremental steps, right? Maybe when we come over to extending our business, that's reimagining, what we want to do for and with our customers. So maybe that's introducing, Bitcoin or distributed ledger, kind of, investments, maybe introducing ESG, investments. So it's that idea of kind of extending into new themes that are the themes where customers want to be, where you want to participate, and maybe more an experimentation, as we'll have seen as Revolut do, this whole idea of fractional trading. So I don't need to buy a share; I just buy the portion of the share that I want to invest in. So at the same time, one organization could be thinking about, how do we incrementally automate what we already do? How do we introduce maybe new ESG investment opportunities in extending the business? At the same time, how are we decomposing the entire business model of investing into fractional trading? And smart organizations are running all those in parallel. And that requires a lot, or a very significant degree of orchestration and so on. And that's a very new demand for organizations. And typically you have to set teams up to do different things. And because those different expectations, those different mandates require you to kind of have different capabilities, have different setups, even in many cases have different reward mechanisms. And so across the bottom here, we're kind of just given maybe some of the kind of the protocols, or some of the decision factors for what might sit where. And then look, everything needs budget focus and environments, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, in sustaining innovation, it's not your traditional kind of, maybe design thinking innovation. It's more about, really following every day where the improvements could be. And that's very much about lean practices. And it's very much about, this kind of is agile of, small iterative steps very, very frequently, to really, identify persistent, continuous improvement and developmental, that Horizon Two. Maybe that, requires more kind of deeper immersion in design thinking to understand what new markets you could be in or what new products you could be in. And that may be done with crowdsourcing with partners. You may be trying to, extract entrepreneurs, we'll touch on that in a moment, from your business and giving them a mandate to kind of almost rethink about where could you extend your business into. And of course, disruptive could be in a very different sense. It could be deep ethnography. What's deep ethnography? Well, that's spending weeks and months actually in the environments, in the new markets with customers, really trying to, observe and see what are they trying to do, what are the problems they're trying to solve, and how could we completely reimagine the role that we might play in solving those customer jobs or customer needs, and then kind of really kind of blank canvas, rethinking what the proposition could be. And that requires lots of radars and scouting and kind of in external perspectives and oftentimes partnering, which we'll come on to a little bit later as well. So the kind of the key things I want to kind of outline with you in innovation is, there's different modes of innovation. Most organizations that are successful have got multimodal or multi-speed innovation muscle, only giving you a sense of some of the different capabilities that they use. But in here in this slide is this idea of each speed needs to be different. And what's challenging for leadership these days is about keeping cohesion and about kind of keeping kind of, joining up all these dots and actually making sure that opportunities move actually from one speed or one mode to the other, because often we'll identify in Horizon 1 a fabulous opportunity that actually should be looked at in Horizon 2 or 3. So the multimodal or the ambidextrous leader needs to think about managing actually three different types of organizations all running at the same time. I hope we're doing okay, folks, keeping an eye on time here. You have any questions, any thoughts, provocations, jump in as I go along. This idea of design thinking, it's this is the kind of the simplest way I have to think about it. Which is sorry, it's my simplest way to share with you what I've seen as a good way to describe how to think about it. I didn't invent this at all. The double diamond has been around for donkey's years, and it's this idea of thinking through the pattern of work around how do we discover and define what the problem is that we should solve, and then how should we design and deliver the best solution to solve that problem. And the whole idea is in your research, you explore all the problems that your end user, your customer, your partner, your broker, your colleague are experiencing to the point where you see the full picture, and then you prioritize the most important problem to solve so you can narrow in on the top problem statement. So when we talk about problem statements, it's about identifying all the problems and then prioritizing the most important one to work on. And then in the same way that you've opened and closed the lens of problems to be solved, you open and close the lens of solutions to solve that problem. And this typically is at the very foundation of design thinking. Now, later in the slides, I've given you this whole, a much more kind of detailed blueprint for if you wanted to introduce design thinking. This is the way to start thinking about it. It starts with discovery, so it's deep immersion, in terms of, the end user through interviews, analytics, competitive, etc., to try and really determine, through the lens of the user, the persona, what is the problems they're trying to solve? And there are many ways to do that. I mean, it's a real art, and there are many techniques behind the art. But the philosophy is discovery and definition through constant feedback and constant iteration, so that we can define the most important problem, and then we ideate on what could be the best potential solution. You test that through prototyping. You then test it through, when you've kind of expanded all, the different variants through prototyping, then you might narrow in on one, and then you really do deep testing on usability on desirability, feasibility, and then you kind of start moving towards a business case. This feels much more iterative, and it is very aligned, as signified on the right-hand side of the slide. This just whole agile philosophy, and often I work with teams on 5-day sprints where day one we do some discovery, then we do definition and ideation, and by day four we're out in the field guerrilla testing with a lo-fi or even a high fidelity prototype, getting real time iteration. And the idea is, this idea of moving quick and fast is about maybe in a week's time we're actually starting to code the prototype and start to moving it into builds. Sometimes that build, can continue in an agile setup. Sometimes it needs to move into a more traditional project management, even a waterfall setup. That's okay, as we've said in the previous session. Another method for people to think about, well, where could we innovate? You can use the design thinking. These blue ocean strategy maps, always really helpful for comparative innovation. So just to use an example here, PlayStation, Xbox, Oculus, Meta now, as we know. So it's a couple of years old, the slide, but it's this idea of identifying where's the competitive opportunity, because the proposition is always moving forward in the market. So sometimes you just have to forget about what was good in the past because it's table stakes or it's not even important. Where you always need to be focusing is to the right. What is the next new frontier of innovation in the marketplace in order for you to really stamp and own, and command both building the capability, building the proposition, and building the competitive disadvantage. And it's about eliminating old features so you can redeploy capacity towards new features. So this is a kind of just a how-to guide of that blue ocean. By the way, blue ocean, red ocean. Red ocean is this whole idea of don't try and win in a crowded market of sharks, because the ocean usually turns red. Somebody gets eaten. And the idea is to swim away and get into a blue ocean where nobody else is playing and you become the alpha shark. Yes, all the sharks join you over time. So blue oceans always become red oceans. It's this whole idea of constant life cycle innovation. Hope you get the idea, but it's a kind of a useful method to have a think about it. But just much more broadly, I always loved the Doblins, and Dublin was a design house bought by Deloitte, but they had a lovely way of thinking about. Actually, there's loads of different ways you can think about deploying innovation in your context. It could be in your profit model or your business model, as they call it. It could be using your network to crowdsource as per Lego ideas. It could be, basically reorientating your structure, the amount of time that you have for people to deploy on or spend on kind of just their own personal innovation, as Google have done with their 20% time. I'm not going to read all the slides. I've given you some examples as we go along. What's my message? My message is you need to be disciplined. You need to have method. You need to have capabilities, and you need to define where you're innovating, what you're trying to innovate for, because the intent and how you establish your innovation effort is critical. And in that kind of thoughtful design of innovation intent, innovation scope, and innovation method comes a much greater potential of success. Later on in the slides, I give you this kind of innovation journey, because a lot of times for organizations, this is a muscle that they're looking to build, a capability that they're willing to sweat. And most organizations go through some kind of innovation maturity like this. So most organizations are past the needing to be aware of why and facing internal disbelief that they've got to disrupt and deploy resources to new horizons. And gradually over time, what they're doing is they're building up they're educating themselves on the different ways to innovate, and then they're starting to experiment, and then they're starting to kind of really hardcore this kind of multimodal innovation kind of construct into their organization so that they can move to mastery. Again, some good links down the bottom that you can dig into. The Gartner maturity model is loads of things, loads of reading on this, and I've kind of peppered much of that through the slides. Here, I've just kind of given you, if we think about moving up that sequencing and stage of maturity, what that means for vision, for team, for funding, for tools, for business engagement. I hope if you've had a chance to read this, you'll find this as a kind of a good ready reckoner to start thinking about where are you, where is your organization on its maturity, and it's also kind of a ready reckoner for not just where you are, but what you might need to think about doing next. It'll never be the answer. It's not a plan, but perhaps it's a blueprint for thinking about maturing innovation in your organization. But maybe stepping back a little bit from that, in the pack that I've given you is just this idea of doing an innovation maturity assessment. So you might want to use that kind of model I've just shown you a second ago. Really happy for you to use that. Oftentimes I've found people just really interesting to use this kind of questionnaire to start asking the question of and answering, where do we think we are in our capability and our maturity to innovate and create competitive disadvantage? And competitive disadvantage is this idea of the blue ocean, getting out and winning in territories that people are not already in, because that's where the premium is, and that's where the proposition opportunity is. So, when you're doing your assessment, I think the slide is a nice, simple slide to ask to assess your innovation capability. Equally happy for you to do this one as well. I mentioned I mentioned entrepreneurs who are entrepreneurs on the inside, and oftentimes they're sitting alive and well in our organization, but unharnessed. And oftentimes we can think about they can work at an individual level or an organizational level. They can work on existing businesses, Horizon 1, or they can work on new ideas in Horizon 2, Horizon 3. And on the left, I've trying to give you kind of almost a nice framework to think about, God, are there people, are we, or are there colleagues who are entrepreneurs that we should be, deploying, and they become our ambassadors for change, as Spain's change specialists, so they kind of, help us evolve our existing business in Horizon 1, or could there be Horizon 2 and 3 people in terms of innovators? And, if we think about groups of them, perhaps these entrepreneurs could be our change management functions, or perhaps their innovation management functions. Anyway, you get the idea, but I just wanted to bring that, concept of rooting out and liberating entrepreneurs in the organization. Always a good question to put forth. A couple of final things to close out on innovation, because I'm going to need to move on. If you have questions or queries, pop them in. Thank you, Sarah. The Six Sigma DMAIC approach, very good, excellent, nice reference. If nobody's seen that, please do investigate it. Definitely worth a quick look. Nice comment. But back to this one, in terms of sometimes, different organizations approach innovation in different ways for different reasons. Sometimes there's, we second people out of their business and put them into an innovation function. And some of the reasons and the best fits are there. Sometimes we rotate people, or we actually bring innovation capability and put it back into the business and fuse it on the inside of the business. So sometimes it's separated out, sometimes we infuse it in, sometimes we run it side by side. These are just kind of structural, potential, constructs to use. And the whole idea is they're all valid. There's pros and cons for each, and there's usually a best fit. And I encourage you to think about in your own kind of endeavors, for the innovation that you want to do, for the type of organization that you are. Sometimes should you, ingest innovation in existing teams? Should you separate them out and second people out? Or, could you potentially run innovation side by side as a new business in its entirety as in the separate one? So just worth thinking about the constructs overall. Right, let's close the loop on innovation. So there's a question from Christine. Garvin, could I provide the names and authors of the maturity frameworks we're using to complete the assessment for CA1? They're mine, Christine, so you won't get authors. They're Garvin's, if that's okay. Happy for you to use other ones, so go for it. But if you wish to use mine, please do, and I'm sharing with you them with you as part of the material overall to do that. Pitfalls, surprises. I mean, sponsorship is critical. This idea of business acumen and empathy. This idea of designing different modes to do different things, to have different people, different expectations, different rewards. Really, really important. I would avoid exclusion. Everybody should be innovating. So, that 70-20-10, that should be 70% of the organization should be in continuous improvement, 20% of the organization. So everybody's in, innovation's everybody's game. But oftentimes we find we have to partner. And it's really critical that if we're partnering, that we create the right bind and the right alignment. There's some stuff the leadership thoughts. There's some stuff on the right around the businesses in dimensions. So that alignment of making sure that the horizons and the swim lanes work in harmony, and there's resource balancing, there's idea transfer, all really critical, the right resources and infrastructure, but really important that we've discipline and method, and avoid cosmetic innovation, because it always get found out. And in the long run, the idea of wanting to be seen to innovate as opposed to actually innovating always plays out. And on the bottom, a really important point about the risk philosophy, sorry, and practices. And it's back to this whole idea of our expectations of probability of success and the return on investment needs to be different in each one of the swim lanes. And oftentimes I see organizations and leaders kind of just run into setting the wrong expectations from each one of the speeds of innovation. Okay, so hopefully that's okay with everybody. There's a nice article that was actually shared by one of your prior learners, one of the prior students. Really nice article on the heart of innovation and really getting down to really what's at its essence. Nice after read if you so want to read that. But I know you're giving you loads of reading as we go through. How's everybody doing? How am I doing? I'm doing okay. I'm going to take a little drink of water. Thank you, everybody. We're just on time there and thereabouts. If you have thoughts, questions, jump in. Thank you all for the thumbs up. Hopefully, I'm keeping you with me. I want to kind of move into our last piece of content, and I want to keep some time at the end to talk about the assignment. So, open. You know, uh, the complexity of everything we're unpacking in this program is surely upon you at this stage, and because of the kind of the newness and the novelty of having to think differently, act differently, use different skills, use different methods, etc., etc. It's quite stifling. It's quite, well, it is disruptive in its very self. So, often we find that organizations are opening up their doors to bringing partners in to help them to move forward. So that's one of the drivers of open. But the second driver of open is that actually there are new platforms, new ecosystems, new environments that beg for open participation. So that's the Amazons, that's the platforms that we see. So open really has two dimensions going on. The slide later on, the model to bring this to life. But there's two dimensions going on. How do we open our doors to partner with people who can help us with thinking methods and technologies so that we can move forward and command these competencies and deliver these strategies. So, how do we open our doors on the inside of our organization to partner to progress? And the second essence of open is as we look at the world and as we see more and more people participating in ecosystems and on platforms, how should we and should we, but if we should, how should we participate in these platforms so that we create value and we obtain value and we derive value from those platforms? They're the kind of the two pieces I want to kind of unlock as we go on. But in both regards, partnering is at the heart of it. So I've tried to give everybody this kind of idea of there are different ways that we partner for different reasons, but typically they're either to partner for to develop a proposition and to work together to combine to create something compelling for the market that we're operating in. Or sometimes we partner because we want to share the spoils. So we don't necessarily have to develop proposition. We can just partner because putting our agendas together can actually be a smarter business thing to do. So, for instance, there's collaborations between the likes of Nike and Jordan. So, Michael Jordan shares his brand and his perspectives about what the best basketball trainers should look like. And Nike developed those. Two partners playing their roles when they come together, both win. So it's that idea of win-win. McDonald's is more, this idea of, there's a central proposition development, and then that's deployed, and partners kind of take that central proposition and build their own businesses around it so that the central business and the franchise businesses, everybody wins. But it's all this premise on win-win. Lots of people do joint venturing. So, Volvo and Uber, so what they're doing is they're bringing their combined capabilities together. So there's, digital and automotive to create autonomous vehicles. We see lots of that happening in the world. Then there's distribution models. And distribution models might be, different roles in a distribution value chain. So Ford make cars, but they don't run garages. Garage owners take the cars and then they create their value from putting those cars into market. So you get the whole idea. There's distribution and broking and so on and so forth. But the new thing that has emerged in the world is this idea of multi-sided platforms or ecosystems, and that's where there's brand new environments that kind of almost kind of intermediate different partners and players, but the platform or the ecosystem in itself creates value for itself, but all the players. So you get into this idea of network effects. And without delving to any more deeper into it, I just want you to have that idea that there are different ways to partner for different reasons, both to build your own prowess, but also to access where other people are and where markets are actually being shaped. So a couple of examples. I always think Ryanair are close to home. I mean, Ryanair aren't a travel company. Sorry, they're not an airline anymore. They're a travel orchestrator. So this idea, we all go onto the Ryanair site. We can book our flight, but we can book a car, we can book a hotel, we can maybe book an experience, etc., etc. So Ryanair are an ecosystem. They're a travel ecosystem, and they partner, as kind of signified on the left, in different ways in order to construct and present that ecosystem of services that helps people, travel in a more convenient, cheaper, but in a more comprehensive way. So, for instance, with rentalcars.com, they don't joint they have developed a joint proposition with rental cars to be able to present people with the Hertz and the Avis and the Europcar, etc., and the Almo offerings. So they have one way of partnering, and they essentially broker those services, but they work together, and they do a little bit of proposition development. They've some joint ventures, and then they've just got some simple collaborations where everybody wins with hotels.com and so on and so forth. So I'm kind of giving you a kind of a look under the cover of what this multi-sided platform, this travel platform looks like. And it's just important to we just take the lesson from this, that it's not as simple as ingesting or presenting yourself in another platform. There's a sophistication underneath how to partner to achieve different things, or because of different parties bring something to the partnership or the ecosystem, and important to think about how to do that. Um, so that's Ryanair. They've started as they're a flight organization. They now want to become a travel ecosystem, and they partner to achieve that. Amazon started in a much different place. They just created a digital marketplace. But as they created that digital marketplace where they basically put buyers and sellers together, they've started to build knowledge, and they started to move into, joint venturing about fashion, about distributing financial services, Amex and Chase, and so on and so forth. And they started building health benefits in collaboration with Haven. So again, it's just bringing this idea to life that there are different ways to construct partnerships. Some of it, and much of it, we think about these multi-sided platforms, but it's not the only way. Some organizations actually try and build their own platform by extending partnerships and ingesting those services in their own, as per Ryanair did. But there's other types of platforms. There's the kind of the mediator. Amazon is a kind of a mediator, but it's extended beyond that with its different partnerships. Airbnb is the classic one where it just puts renters and accommodation providers together. But as they've done that, they have to build out a more sophisticated, set of partnerships around travel content, experience guides, payments, logistics, photographers, cleaners, etc., etc. So they create a whole ecosystem. But a lot of it is through its curation, as opposed to hardwiring business partnerships. Health and wellness means it's a beast. It's the ultimate ecosystem, with lots of people playing different roles through different partnership constructs. We won't jump ourselves in there. So let's bring it back and simplify it all. Really, I said to you at the very start that there's kind of two archetypes for partnering. Starting from where you are today, you can typically go below the line. You'll see my image, my four box image on the left, from your core, from where you're starting on today. Oftentimes you partner to build capability, and enhancing your own capability is kind of bottom left. So that's when you outsource or insource. It could be agile, it could be innovation, capability that makes your core or your proposition stronger, or allows you to keep pace with the marketplace. Sometimes you'll also ingest third-party services into your proposition out the front. So sometimes it could be capability in the back, or it can be proposition in out the front, in order to strengthen your proposition to market, all with the view that you're trying to build your core proposition and competency with the customer. Sometimes, as we strengthen our core proposition, we extend our proposition into other partnerships, or into other ecosystems. And you've got some commentary down around it there. Or sometimes we build up core competency ourselves, and that core competency could be something that we actually give to somebody else. So, for instance, mBank Bank in Poland, it's a fully fledged digital bank, very mature now. It has become the bank, or both platform and operating model, for La Poste in France. So it's that idea of building your using partnership to build your competency, and then onward sell your competency, or using partnerships to enhance your proposition, or using partnerships to present your proposition in somebody else's proposition. So you use different partnerships to do that in different ways. This is there's lots on this slide. For me, I've always found it as a good kind of ready reckoner to kind of give you a starter for 10 to say, why would we partner? And what does that mean for us? So are we doing it for offense or defense reasons? Are we doing it to innovate and find new territories, or are we doing it to find new efficiencies? I won't try and read through it because there's a lot in it. But I do encourage you, if there's one slide I'd like you to have a look at afterwards. If you've got that concept of you partner to extend your capabilities or extend your proposition, this is a good way to start asking yourselves the right questions about, why are you doing that? And then leading you down the path of what's the best way to do that. But as you do start to partner, you've got to start thinking about it's not just anymore your own business that you need to run. If you're partnering, you need to start thinking about what potential frictions and collaborations and consequences that partnership means, both in terms of your proposition, also in terms of your platforms, and but right back into your manufacturing, your administration, and right down to your technology and data. Partnering is not easy. Partnering is complex, and it needs a fully fledged strategy right from the customer right back to your tech, and indeed right back into your commercial model. And on this slide, just try to give you kind of a ready reckoner for how to think about that. Now, I'm keeping an eye on the chat here, and it's 2014, and there's a question coming in just about the upcoming assignment. So I'm going to take that in a few minutes with the assignment, if that's okay. Let me finish out our final couple of thoughts on partnering and ecosystems. Often we apply open innovation, so we actually partner for innovation. Sometimes we do that just to kind of build community and knowledge. Sometimes we do that to participate in incubators and co-working spaces, so that we get to practice with other people, and we can generate insights from working and in live experiments with other people. Sometimes we build our own accelerators. Sometimes we put venture capital into new ventures, venture capital, new ventures, so that we can spin off new businesses. And sometimes organizations have a whole strategic portfolio where they really separate out and kind of harness partnerships through formal structures in order to create breakthrough innovation, that kind of Horizon 2 or Horizon 3 innovation. So important to keep that in mind. Sometimes you acquire innovation, and sometimes you acquire, sometimes you acquire partners into your organization for innovation purpose. So that could be to grow your target base or scale your business. It could be revenue plays, capability plays. Again, this is just articulating that you can extend through acquisition. So sometimes it's not always just partnering, that you bring partnering to its kind of nth degree, and you actually conclude with an acquisition. And again, a useful ready reckoner to hopefully help you think about what might be your intent in that regard. Open finance, open banking, PSD. We won't delve into that in detail, but it's something you should be thinking about. It's maturing slowly. We're moving more to open finance in the UK. PSD2 is coming along. It hasn't really shifted the market, but it definitely is. And some good reading for always historically from Accenture in this place. Probably found it always to be one of the best sources of thinking. But the final piece I would say is, I mean, I have included kind of what a strategy on a page might be for open services and open banking. You can have a look at that. But I'm kind of calling out here some prerequisites, some cautions, and some non-negotiables non-negotiables when it comes to either thinking about open banking or just, open partnering in more in general. Partnering is complex. To enter into opening your doors to build capability or extend your proposition, it's one to be cautious or thoughtful about. It can be very successful, but it needs to be very intended, making sure that you pick the right mix of collaborators, agreeing a real clear ownership model and getting the governance right around that, getting everybody nailed into common success factors, common rewards, and common data sharing and common learning. These are all kind of prerequisites, things to watch out for is, don't get your partners wrong. I've got partners wrong in an organizational context and an advisory context. It really needs due diligence because of the weakest link, the weakest chain. So, really being thoughtful and present and careful about picking and partnering in the right way. Really, really important, understanding boundaries and chemistry and making sure that the risk appetite is appropriate. All lessons that I'm sharing with you from experience, and some deal breakers, some non-negotiables. I mean, just, good old-fashioned communication, and really keeping to scope and making sure that you nail down intent so there's no over the top and tangential plays, because sometimes these things can creep in. So just some experiential cautions in that regard, but kind of bring it all back up for air. There is that, necessity drive need, maybe because of regulation through things like open banking, but definitely just through demand to extend, enhance, and present your proposition in new territories or to build capability, to allow you to extend and enhance proposition or just to move at the pace you need to move at for maybe it's agile, maybe it's innovation, maybe it's data analytics. We are in much more of a partnering world. So what I wanted to do is present you with that idea of your partner for proposition or your partner for capability. And then many of the frameworks are to, and the kind of the guidance in the slides are to help you think about making sure that you do that in the right way. Right, I'm going to check in with everybody. I have 10 minutes left, and I wanted to get to assignment two, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to jot any questions to me or pose any questions as we're going along. Hopefully that's okay, but I'll give you a second just to do that while I'm reading one of the chats here. Okay, so I'm kind of getting a question here regarding the upcoming assignments. Would it be correct to focus my analysis on the practical utility of the models? Very definitely so. So let me talk through a bit more guidance on the assignment, and I'll perhaps try and touch in on the question that came in the chat. But can I highlight the specific problem-solving aspects of each of the frameworks within with the context of actual business cases? If I don't cover your answers this evening, just ping me offline, and I'll try and cover any questions you have. But let me kind of walk everyone through for a couple of minutes, kind of another just level, a double click of guiding you on the assignment and how to use it. I can't do it for you. I can't over guide you because that's the level 9 we're working at, but I want to make this as easy as possible for you, and therefore make it a little bit easier for me by making it easier for you so that we can get you to a good score. So here I'm saying that the central artifact that there's two artifacts that I want, two minimum requirements. I want, for your pass, on your assignment, one slide, one memo, right? So the slide that I want you to do is look through now the 7 core competencies, score where you are today versus where you believe you need to be in the future to execute your strategy, which you may have done in module 1, or you may not have done module 1. So, from where you are today for what you believe your strategy is. I want you to be processing now that we've gone through the competencies. Where do you think you are today? Where do you need to think you need to be? And what's the gap? And how are you going to bridge it? Ultimately, that's what I want you identifying. You can use the single slide, and accompanying the single slide It's a 1,000 word memo, no more than that, that sets out your conclusion of your analysis and your resulting recommendations. Don't regurgitate the slide into a memo. The slide should be your analysis. The memo should be your conclusions and recommendations. So if you can think about splitting them in that way, slide is your analysis, memo is your conclusions of that analysis and your resulting recommendation. And again, shared this slide with you before. So for each of the seven building blocks, where are you? Where do you think you need to be? And what's it going to take to get there? So that's your analysis. It's most likely going to be a qualitative exercise. Sometimes, I've seen brilliant kind of more quantitative scoring approaches using. That's up to you. The more you think about this, the more you develop it, and the more you spend time with it, the more value hopefully you can get on it. But we're all busy professionals, doing this in our discretionary time. So we don't expect everybody to do that. But if you can, the more time you give it, the better you will learn. And that's really, hopefully what you're spending your time and your money on. And I want you to, and my objective and my hope is that you have that best, deepest learning experience, because that's where you get value for, really employing this and deploying this in your work going forward. So, there can be summary level stuff, one slide, one memo, that gets you through the gates. That'll get you your 40 or 50%. If you want to go deeper, what I would be suggesting you do is, in addition to your slide, in addition to your 1,000 word memo, uh, use each one of the frameworks to expand your analysis, right? So, for instance, put the seven frameworks there in your slide deck this evening. I've called them out to you all through, but for Agile Backdrop, have a look at it using, your assessment of your organization versus the principles and values, that innovation maturity assessment. Most people find this to be very useful, so I encourage you to use that. And then the where and how to play. This is the most complex one, but it stretches your mind to have a think about what would be the intent of partnering. You can use it all, you can use some, but the reason why we want you to use it is that you become accustomed to thinking through these lenses. So if you want to go for honors and distinction, sorry, I'm chasing my slide to get it back up here. Do your one page, do your single slide, do your 1,000 word memo, but oftentimes people will build out additional slides or additional, material in their memo so that they double click in and evaluate their capability versus, being customer centric, or building value proposition, or really having a smart strategy in terms of their best way to reach customers and leverage partners. So almost think of it as a double click. So the single click is just doing your single slider on, oh, sorry, I can't do it on, I've stopped sharing now, haven't I? Oh my God, I'm in a panic now. I better get this back up. Right. Hopefully you can see that slide. So the single click is, where are we today? And where do we think we need to be in the future? That's just kind of, a single evaluation. Uh, when when students are going for the double click, what they're doing is, let me just show you what this might look like. They're then kind of, taking these six dimensions, and then they're perhaps preparing an additional slide using the six dimensions. So they might be using customer centricity, then they might be doing one on value proposition, then they might be doing one on route to market. I'm kind of doing this in real time, so you can see how good and not I am at typing. And then they do one on op model. So they're basically taking the six dimensions and they're doing a double click or a second slide on each one of the frameworks. And that is really substantiating what is the ultimate score that they're coming up with in each dimension. So you're taking the single dimension, you're breaking it down. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm sure it does. I really do hope it does. But I'm going to pause now to give you an opportunity to ask any questions. Thoughts, questions, folks? So there's a
Marvin,
question in.
sorry.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's me. Sorry, that's me.
Brilliant.
I was just wondering, is there a blank template for that somewhere? Do we have that somewhere?
You should have it. If you don't, I'll make sure I get it sent through tonight or first thing in the morning and get it up on the portal for you. As far as I know, it's up there in PowerPoint already. I'll make sure it's there if it's not. Okay. So you'll get into your LMS, the Learning Portal, IOB Learn. Isn't that what we all use? So it should be up as one of the resources that
So
you can use there.
it's a PowerPoint slide that we can move the little levers,
Yeah,
is it?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm going to give you the
Oh, okay.
PowerPoint slide. And all of these slides will be in PowerPoint so you can play around with them as well. That okay?
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, great question. Thank you. Yeah, brilliant. So I'll make sure I'll have a look tonight or in the morning. I have a call to do after we finish. So depending on what time that finishes, it might be the morning, but I'll definitely make sure it's up there for you for tomorrow, Leanne, and everybody. Is that okay? Yeah, really good question. Very practical, but very good. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts? Is that clear as mud?
Also, are you expecting like a bibliography or any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So, in the study guide, there's guidance, Leanne, about how to construct that. So if you're using references, yes,
Okay.
Harvard style referencing and a bibliography would be appropriate.
Yeah, perfect.
Yep, yep, yep. And there should be guidance up on again on IOB Learn on that. It should be in your study guide as well. As far as I know, that's in your study guide. Definitely is up on IOB Learn. But let me confirm. Yep, if you're referencing me or others, just make sure that you do that because that's just academic standard, and that's to make sure we retain the standard that maintains the accreditation of UCD back to your ultimate, yeah, successful graduation when that comes around. Okay.
Hi there, just one question
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
Do we have to follow? I know in your example you were changing some of the building blocks. Do
Mm.
we necessarily have to follow the same exact building,
No,
the
no,
seven
great
building
question,
blocks?
Terry. No, 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 no,
Okay.
so absolutely. So, I'm only giving you kind of the framework that I use and I think about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, no, but 100% great question. If you're thinking about it a different way, you go with that. I mean, it's really important that you own this. And present it back to me. And again, Terry, like I'm only into positive scoring here, right?
Okay.
So,
Great.
you know what I mean? I'm not about to, we don't start at 100 and work back. We start at zero and work forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. So I'll positive mark you. Just, when you're presenting it back, just make sure it's kind of, it's self-guiding. But don't worry, I'll make sense of it. Loads of people give me loads of different stuff and loads of different things, and I love that variation. Mostly if somebody's a little bit innovative and if it's there's a bit of ingenuity in it, I'll react positively and I'll work forward. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Brilliant, Terry. Thank you. Okay, 2030. How's everybody doing? We okay for this evening? There's a lot to get through, isn't there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, Anastasia, you're okay. Bob, you're okay. Brilliant stuff. Okay, if there's anything else, folks, just drop me a note offline. I'm going to let you depart for your evening. Thank you so much for being with us. Content gets lighter from here. That's the heavy content done. We are together again, I think, on the 10th of April. So don't worry, I've already made a note. By the end of this week, I'll get that material up on IOB Learn. I'll make sure we get the PowerPoint up there. Any questions, come through the IOB. You have my details. Don't even know if you have a WhatsApp or not yet, but don't worry. Just come through to me. I'll make sure I get to you as quick as I can and get everybody solved for. Be aware of the old chat GPT. Use it as your friend, but don't let it write your assignment because we'll catch it and it won't do us any favors. So that's the wrap up from me. All right, everybody.
Thank you.
Toodaloo. Have a
Thank
great evening.
you.
Thanks,
See
Carol.
you.
Bye
Well
bye.
done, everybody. Thank you.